So I'm reading a story called When God Starts Over. And in this story, you have these Squid Game-esque trials in which people are having to play usually sports type games with slightly different rules. Sometimes it'll be like a basketball shootout, free throws, or 3-point contest with rules like if you don't make 1 out of 10 shots, you're just dead. And then as the competition goes on, you got to make at least 10 shots in the last round. So if you miss a single shot in the last round, you're dead. Although usually it's not as intense as Squid Games. People can opt out after getting through 1 round type of deal. But this is just to set the scene for a pretty cool scene I read a couple days ago. So in this particular point in time, the main character is about to have to play a soccer game, and a 11-on-11 soccer game. And in this soccer game, the rules are not only does the opposing team lose after the 90 minutes, and all of them die, so once whichever team loses is going to explode. The rules to soccer are mostly the same, with the exception that physical contact of all kind is completely allowed. So you are full on allowed to murder each other. So this was the setup, and they go into a room and they're all supposed to select their teams by pressing buzzers. And when the main character is looking at the enemy squad, a bunch of them look out of place. They look a lot weaker than everybody else. They don't seem like they belong. And he's kind of going, what's up here? And all of a sudden, 7 of his teammates go and hit the other team's buzzer. And once the 22 people are in the trial room, there's no backing out. So they're stuck here at this point. So now that the 7 people that were supposed to be on the main character's team have all gone and hit the other team's buzzer, all of a sudden these 7 individuals that are looking out of place, looking really weak, are stuck hitting the main character's team's buzzer. So now we've got an 11v11 soccer match in which one team has 11 absolute studly, steroidal all-stars, and the other team has 4 steroidal all-stars, one of which is our main character, who thankfully has got a lot of smarts, intelligence, strategy, and whatnot, and 7 essentially crybabies that are just accepting their fate and are assuming that they're going to die. And they're getting ready to cower in the corner the whole soccer match. So about 10-15 minutes go by, and the 4 people are fighting for their absolute life. They're getting ganged up on. Thankfully, this is a fantasy world, so every time a goal is scored, everybody gets teleported back to their starting spots. So the main character, along with his 3 allies, have managed to pull some absolute shenanigans every time they were backed into a corner to reset the field. And after doing this a few times, the main character turns to an ex-murderer who was taking part in this stuff, likely because of his past, and says, "I need you to be a villain." And the murderer character gets confused and goes, "What?" And the main character goes, "Have you ever heard of the story of the Pious Believer that got caught up in a flood? He was a devout believer in God, and he got caught up in a flood, and he was praying for God to save him. And while he was praying for God to save him, a piece of driftwood came by. And he didn't grab onto the piece of driftwood because he was waiting for God to save him. And he continued to pray to God and wait for God to save him. And then a vine dropped down. And he could have just grabbed onto the vine and pulled himself to safety. However, this pious believer, he really believed in God. And so he continued to pray that God would save him. And he was waiting for God to save him. And then a boat of people came by within earshot, and all he had to do was shout out, and the people would have came and rescued him. However, the man was a pious believer in God, and he was waiting for God to save him. And so the man drowned, and he goes up to heaven, and he looks at God and goes, "What the heck, man? I was waiting for you to save me, and you never did." And God goes, "Bro, I sent you a piece of driftwood, I dropped you a vine, and I sent you a rescue boat. What more do you want me to do?" And the murderer character goes, "Ah, what a fool. There aren't fools like that in this world." And the main character retorts, "Actually, we have some fools like that here with us right now." And immediately the murderer, ex-murderer, grinned, knowing what needed to be done. And he goes over to the 7 people who had been cowering in the corner, waiting to die or waiting to be saved, and said, "Hey, you're going to help. I know that you are much weaker than these people and that you may die trying to fight for victory. However, you will not sit here and wait to be saved." And the people complained. They refused. They claimed, "We'd be of no help. We'd be of no use. What good would us weaklings be?" And without missing a beat, the villain beheaded one of the 7 men, as the other 6 looked on in horror. And he said, "You can either cooperate when I ask you to and risk your life to help us survive, or I can kill you all now." And when he blew the whistle for the cooperation, they charged forward and aided the 4 men in victory.